You're listening to Learning How to Live, the podcast about what happens after you wake up from the life you were told to want. I'm Quinn Stainfield-Bruce, and 6 years ago my best attempt at life had failed. Now I'm learning how to rebuild work, love, health, and self-worth, and I'm inviting you to learn alongside me. Let's get into it. All right. We are live. Welcome back to Learning How to Live. I'm here with Rachel Vecht, who is a wonderful, wonderful woman who I was introduced to through mutual friends a couple of years ago. And if I was to sort of summarize how I see her, she is an expert in parenting. She's spent 25 years running her own consultancies that specialize in finding work-life balance for parents. And, you know, as a mother herself, of adult children now, you know, she is a true expert. But from my own personal perspective, energetically, Rachel is just unbelievably kind. She has this powerful, loving and empathetic energy. There is this, I don't know how else to express it other than this absolutely profound maternal wisdom and instinct that comes, that emanates from her. And, you know, I've been following a lot of her content and activity for the last couple of years. And yes, an expert in her field without a doubt. But for me, it's more the the energy and, like I say, the wisdom that I feel from her, which is why I really wanted and was really excited that she would join me, was brave enough to join me to record an episode of Learning How to Live. Not to solve the world's problems per se, not to necessarily offer life-changing advice, but certainly someone that I could soundboard a lot of the heavy parenting stuff that I have come to experience, if I could, and to share with and to soundboard off of. You know, if people listening relate or take anything away, well, that would be wonderful. I myself am honoured and privileged enough that you've joined me, Rachel. So look, thank you very much. And, you know, feel free to add to that introduction.
Thank you. I think I need to manage expectations because I don't think there's such a thing as an expert. I just think I've got like 30 years of experience working with kids and 24 years having my own. But I feel like as soon as you call someone an expert, it's like, you know what you're doing and nobody else does. So that's really not my way of doing things. I have a lot of knowledge and experience, and I'm a bit obsessed with reading books relating to parenting and psychology. These are like just a few, but I buy them every week. But I feel like, I think any parent is really the expert on their child. And also an expert feels like, you know what you're doing and we have to follow you. And I'm just trying to create that space to give parents tools and strategies to kind of just support them on that journey of raising children. And my main focus is around relationship and connection. So nice. I would redo the introduction and say I'm not an expert.
I think that's no, but yeah. I think that's a profound thing to land on, is that I see you as that, right? So I see you as an expert. Now, why do I see you as an expert? And if, you know, to use your example, if every parent is an expert of their own children, why do I therefore not see myself as an expert? And I think this is a really, really interesting point because, you know, the whole reason I started this podcast was to share with people, to share with anyone who wanted to listen, the things that I've had to learn the hard way. All right. So some of them was around romantic relationships. Some of it was around recovery from addiction. You know, some of it was around money or work. And parenting is, is definitely the thing that I'm in the middle of right now. And I think, part of why I wanted to have this conversation was that I'm going through a period of profound guilt and shame. I am a father of, or maybe I should have said this earlier, but I'm a father of 3 children. I've got a teenage daughter and 2 sons who are 9 and 11. And I worry all of the time that I have messed them up somehow. That I am not doing enough, that actions from my past have somehow caused some form of irreparable damage to their development. And even though 99% of that is just not true, I feel not good enough as a dad all of the time. And so I suppose in many ways it's easy for me to then want to put you on a very large pedestal and call you an expert, because I suppose in my eyes, the way that the knowledge and wisdom and way that you carry yourself as a parent is something aspirational for me. But I guess you're right. It comes from a place of not feeling enough and not doing enough. And I know this is something that lots of dads feel.
Mm.
Does that
I
make
mean,
sense?
yeah, because of I started out as a school teacher, but I realized that hadn't prepared me at all for really understanding children. And so I knew how to teach maths and English, but literally, I mean, I qualified at 22. And within a few months of being in the classroom, I was like, I mean, I was teaching like 6, 7 year olds. It's not about the maths and English. It's about their mindset and attitude and their openness to learning and their self-esteem and all of these things. And that's when I got much more interested in that than like teaching subjects. And I started to read up and explore and understand more about child development and different techniques. And this is, what was it? In the early, no, I don't know, 1996 or something. So it wasn't really the way it was, like this whole positive parenting approach wasn't really out there. I didn't have a name for it. I just had a feeling like I'd never come across the concept of a growth mindset, which is now so well known from Carol Dweck. But it was just like a natural feeling like I need to work on that before they're going to be ready to learn anything else. And then I was using some of these tools, and parents of kids I was teaching were like, wow, like how come they're like this with you and they're not like this with me at home? And I was like, well, first of all, I'm their parent, their teacher, not their parent. So it's a completely different relationship and kind of less emotional. But that's when I got really fascinated about trying to give parents the tools to kind of raise their children and set them up for adulthood. Doing this work, and it then moved to kind of outside of schools and into the workplace. I've literally spoken to tens of thousands of parents all over the world in every sector you can imagine. And I don't think I've ever come across someone who's like, yeah, I'm doing a great job. I've really got this parenting thing sorted. And what you just described is often how I feel. And I spend all day long speaking to parents, whether it's one-to-one or talks, like keynote talks for hundreds of people. And as I'm speaking, I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, am I actually implementing all this stuff myself? And, it's one thing knowing it, and it's a very different thing putting it into practice. And I think that's okay. I think it's so important to create that space to actually be honest about how hard it is. It's like, it's the hardest, I think personally, the hardest, most important job in the world without any training whatsoever. Like, can you think of any other job that is so immensely crucial that you have just no one explaining what's the most effective way to do it? And there isn't
I
one
think
way.
I actually think it's incredibly messed up. I think that we are never taught how to be parents in any thorough way. And this is a big thing for me, Rachel, is that the way that we're taught to be parents is by our parents.
Mm,
And that famous poem, they fuck us up, our mum and dad. They do not mean to, but they do. And it's funny and it's true and it's not funny because it's true. It's we learn from our parents, but if our parents were dysfunctional, then that's where we learn. There's no place. Now, like, I passionately believe from a human perspective that we have lost the tribe, we have lost the village, we have lost the elders, we have lost the sense of community where there would be grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts who would all collectively support the family unit and be the family unit and offer wisdom and structure and all of these things. And I do think it's, having lost that has left parents on their own and left them with the lessons that they learn from their own potentially dysfunctional upbringing. Not every upbringing necessarily is. And I really want to talk more about that, but I'd actually like to just go right back to something you said earlier, which was, you were a teacher and there was this moment where you realized that it was more, that there had to be something around connection rather than just maths and English. What was that? I'd love to know more about that light bulb moment.
Well, it was like I'm trying to, as a teacher, for example, impart knowledge, like teach kids how to do, basic things, how to read, how to add up. But if they weren't really like connected to me, like everything made me realize how much everything is about relationship. And I see this with my own kids. Like last night I had parents evening for my youngest child, and my last one who's in school, she's 15. Every time I sat down in front of a teacher, the dynamic was so different, and it wasn't to do with the subject. I still, even the word physics just makes me feel nervous. I hated it. But my daughter also hated it. But this year she's got the most incredible teacher, and suddenly it's just like all opened up, and she's really enjoying it. And it just shows, I mean, a lot of the work that I do is about culture in the workplace, but you're creating that own mini culture at home or in a classroom. And it's how like comfortable you feel, how connected you are to that person, how safe. We talk so much in the workplace about psychological safety and that feeling of belonging and being valued and heard. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about young children or grown adults or your relationship with your own parents, or it just applies like across the board, literally from toddlers, from when they start to understand things, all the way through to every kind of adult relationship, whether that's a romantic relationship, a relationship with a colleague, just all these different things. And also one of the things I really feel strongly about parenting, and because I speak to a lot of parents, especially like in those early years, just the logistics of like getting through a day, getting your child fed and dressed and dropped at nursery or whatever stage is, whatever's going on. If they're older, it's homework and dropping them off in various extracurricular activities and whatever. But we get so bogged down in the day-to-day logistics and just kind of getting through a day and a week and a month that we really lose sight of the bigger picture and what our real role is. And our actual role as a parent is to raise an adult. It's to prepare our kids so that when they hit 18 or when they're living independently, they've got all the qualities and skills that they need to succeed in the world. And so I've always
It
had
is
that.
like,
Yeah, I've had that. Well, it depends what you think is important. So there's no right or wrong with this, but it's just having the clarity on what that is. And that's what's always guided my parenting. And I had to learn this because if I think about my eldest, who's 24, in the beginning, it's like, oh, everybody's doing swimming and this activity and that activity. And like, if I don't give them all these opportunities, then, I'm a bad parent, or, I don't know, just all these things that I saw other people doing that I felt that I had to do. And then I just stripped it all back, even stupid things like going to every single birthday party they're invited to. Like if you've got 30 kids in a class, that's a lot of weekends in a year. So like setting your own boundaries and being confident is like, this is what matters to like me and my family. And this is what I think is really important. And I'm not going to worry about, what other people are doing. And you're talking about we've lost that tribe and that real kind of connection also because so many people move for work. They often live on the other side of the world to their families. I work with a lot of international families. Um, but then the other piece of it is it's become like a bit of a competitive sport. So whilst you're kind of more insular because you don't have that tribe, everything is so public because of social media and posting and like here's the perfect family holiday and tomorrow's Halloween, look at our marvelous costumes and this, so you feel like wow, this I don't think in our generation we didn't really know what everyone else was doing. You go into your house and then that's your own private space, so that also adds like this crazy layer of pressure. And because there is so much information and advice out there, it's fueling like this sense of like you're not doing things right. And then it's so contradictory. Like you can read one article and then you watch another podcast and you're like, I'm so confused. I actually don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. That
And
just
and I'm hearing this from you as as someone who, at least it appears to me, is very functional, right? And I think about myself, and because to go take it, I don't know, take it a little deeper. My mum left when I was 13, and I have that maternal abandonment wound. And then, I was raised by my father mostly throughout my formative teenage years. And bless him with all his, bless both my parents. I love them both dearly. But so, he's not particularly emotionally aware because his mother wasn't. And so he did his best, but I was very much left not feeling seen and heard and particularly worthy. And so I remember going into my sort of early 20s thinking I really wanted to be a young dad, but I don't know what my thoughts were beyond that. And it's like there wasn't a huge amount of planning that went into having children for me,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I'm sure my daughter will probably listen to this at some point, but it's like, so there's nothing I don't really talk to her about, rightly or wrongly. But it's like at 24, 25, I have my daughter and I'm running a business, and I guess I went into the idea of creating a family unit subconsciously or maybe even consciously at that age. I just want to recreate what I didn't have. And if I can recreate that, then maybe I'll feel more whole. It's like if I can have this thing that can love me, then maybe I'll feel loved. And not to really go straight off the deep end with that, but it's kind of a thing, right? And I work with a lot of people who, whether it be through addiction or attachment issues or insecurity, and it's often a thing, it's like, if I can create this thing that will love me, then I will feel loved. And obviously I've come to learn that the way that we learn feel, to love is to love ourselves. And it's only in loving ourselves that we can then love others. There's nothing external that fixes that.
yeah,
However, from a parenting perspective, I went into this. I was like, well, get married, have babies, build the home that I never had, and then I can be happy. Um, and and obviously that's not how it works.
mm.
I'm not I don't know if I remember exactly why I even started talking about that at this point. Um,
Well, I mean, just hearing you speak, there's a few things. One is you said you didn't really think about it too much. You're just like, well, let's have a child, which actually is probably one of the best ways because I don't know, but I speak to a lot of people in their late 30s and they're like, when do I know if I'm ready? And if you actually knew what was really involved properly, I don't think anyone would really take the plunge. Because it's just like a crazy amount of it's responsibility forever. So it is such a huge role to take on, but sometimes if you think about it too much, it's a very natural thing to do. So,
so
um,
I used to say, I don't know whether this is in poor taste or not, but it's like, I'm divorced, obviously, and I was like, if they made getting married as hard as it is to get divorced, I think, there'd probably be fewer divorces.
yeah, yeah, probably too. Um, but also what you were saying something else now it's popped out of my head. I've completely forgotten. What was the last thing you were saying before that? About
I
happiness. So, yeah,
mm,
that's like another core thing that I was always really conscious from when my kids were young, of which I guess is maybe something your parents didn't share with you or instill in you. But I've always said, and when they're having struggles with like friendships or various things going on, I always say that you are the only person responsible for your own happiness. So even if you've got this whole setup and you get married and you have kids or you've got this friendship group, it's all about how you feel inside. So you can put two people in the same environment with all the same elements, but they'll feel completely different. So that's but we spoke like have you come across you know Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, the 7 Habits of highly effective people and families and all the rest. And I remember there's the one for teenagers, it's all the same 7 habits. But Stephen Covey had 9 kids and he's got this son, Sean, who wrote one of these books for kids. It's like literally the same 7 habits, but teaching it to young children. And it's through like storytelling and different characters. And there was a story about, I don't know, going through the day of some character and that then coming to this realization that you're responsible for your own happiness. And I remember reading that to my kids when they were literally 4 or 5. So there's like these certain messages that you're trying to filter through from a very young age. And it's quite terrifying. But I normally say to parents, I don't know where I got this figure from, but it's always been in my head that about 80% of parenting is modeling, which it is a really terrifying thought.
oh,
But
but that's so powerful, and I can see that today. So, when I was married to my children's mother, we were both fairly hurt people, and we met each other very young. We were 21, 22, something like that. And, we were, we trauma bonded, our own insecurities matched each other. And so, you know, modeling parenting was just not functional. Like it just, and it wasn't that we weren't like, their mother's amazing as like, she's a great, amazing mother in that, the way that she turns up and gets things done and the activities and the homework and the food and like all of these things. But like, and just like I turn up as a father, like, people tell me I'm an amazing father. I turn up in all sorts of ways physically, but also since my last 7 years of recovery, the way I turn up with emotional awareness and actually how emotionally aware my children are now is also incredible. But we'll maybe talk about that in a bit. But how we modeled a healthy dynamic at 25, 25 into 35 type thing was not great because but to your point about, the 80% of the impact coming from the modeling, it didn't matter how many clubs we did, how many extra classes we did, how organic the food was, how constructive play dates were, because actually in the home, energetically, we weren't we didn't feel particularly safe or happy or like or there wasn't love being modeled. And then again, it sort of goes back to not knowing what love really was or felt like because of not loving myself, and therefore not being able to model that, and how profoundly impactful that was. I have when my ex-wife and I divorced 5 years ago or so, my youngest, who's now 9, he was so angry because the first year and a half of his life was a sort of separation period, and then it was, living with dad, living with mum. So he didn't, for him, like, it must have felt very unsettled. I say unsafe, not physically unsafe, but emotionally probably unsettled.
mm,
And so it took me a long time of consistently, and I had to literally do this. I had to sit with him in the evening sometimes and say, I know you're angry and it's okay. I'm not leaving you. And I had to sort of repeat this like a mantra, like, I'm never leaving you. I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm never leaving you. I love, and he literally would then physically sort of soften. And now, obviously, some years later, I still see that shell, right? And I guess it's stuff like this that I actually really feel guilty about. I think I've done enough work on myself, Rachel, to not feel so guilty about, them not learning Mandarin or, being grade 8 on the violin. It's like I'm all right with that. It's
Yeah.
more sort of seeing how I now, like my fiance and I model love in the home, right? We model caring and kindness and support and compassion, and we never argue in front of the children, and it's this very, very loving dynamic, and we can see the impact that has. I guess I find myself looking back and feeling guilty about the damage I may have caused through not modeling that.
Mm. I mean, I think whatever age kids a parent has, guilt is probably the word that comes up the most in any conversation. Um, but then when you think about it, like, where does that feeling of guilt come from? Is it an internal or an external influence? And so often we've just created this narrative in our own head, which is not even the reality.
Go on.
One no, so one one tool that I recommend is literally, I don't know if you ever do brain dumps, where you literally take a piece of paper, set a timer for 5 minutes, and just get all those thoughts. Like, if you're focusing on your parenting or just anything, like what's in your head right now, and just write it all down. And
Like
it
journaling.
doesn't yeah, it doesn't mean you have to do anything with it, but it's just being able to articulate it. And like, does this guilt, like, I don't know, stupid thing, I'm not making a home cooked meal 7 nights a week, or I feel guilty because I'm only home, when they go to bed, say for a working parent, 3 nights a week or whatever. But like, where does this come from? And how can I just reframe it and look at it differently? And again, that goes back to what I was saying about, same for kids, but your mindset and attitude and how you view things completely, shifts everything. And we're so good at talking about what we're getting wrong, um, instead of focusing on what's going well. And also the other thing, because it sounds like you have been on this kind of journey of discovery and become much more self-aware as your kids have grown up, that the other thing that so many parents say to me is, especially sometimes, I don't know, they'll hear me do a talk about navigating emotions and nurturing emotional intelligence in your kids, and they're like, oh my God, I've got it all wrong. I can't believe it. And I was like, that's not the intention at all. There's no point. You're just wasting so much energy by constantly going over the past and thinking, I did the best that I could at that time with the knowledge I had. And in your situation, with the fact that I was a young parent, and, the most of the way you parent is what you saw from your own parents. So that's where I was at that time. And we're so good at going backwards and ruminating over the past. Also, we catastrophize into the future as parents. You're like, oh my God, they can't do this. What's going to happen when they're whatever age? But I just think it's like really thinking, what specifically, not, oh, I feel guilty. Like, what do I feel really guilty about? Does it actually matter? And if it does, how can I actually look at it differently? But also just moving forward. And the other thing so many parents say to me is like, is it too late? And it doesn't matter if you've got a child in their 30s. It is or any age. It is never too late to change your approach. And psychologists talk a lot about, I don't know if you've heard about the concept of rupture and repair. So rupture is when you've messed things up, in some way in your relationship. But the repair, the powerful bit is, so now what? How do you go to that child or go to that person and say, look, I'm not perfect. How do you really acknowledge the mistakes that you've made and move forward? Um, and that's what makes us human beings. We can recognize where we've gone wrong and shift. And maybe that person doesn't want to hear, and it's all very well, like, yeah, you're saying all the right words, but I'm not feeling it. So sometimes you actually need to show how you've changed. And a lot of parents might say, oh, I heard this talk or I read this book and it really made me reflect and think that maybe perhaps some things I have done differently, I didn't do in the right way. And maybe you haven't felt, I don't know, unconditional love, or I've made you feel that you've got to do something because I want you to do it rather than because it's coming from you, and I'm sorry and let's talk it through or do something differently. But there's always, always that opportunity to try and um, just change and improve. And it's absolutely never too late. I mean, you know how people can change. You've seen it in everything that you've been doing. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of it. I'm trying not to turn this into my own personal session, but it's like, you know, tell me more about reframing.
So it's really like, this is the situation, this is what I see. How can I flip it around and look at it differently? And so, um, I mean, just as a stupid example that I had again with my daughter yesterday. So she's like, I don't understand anything in, I don't know, some subject in school, or I can't do this. And it's like, well, actually, just that's not true. Like, there are certain elements that you're doing really well. You're moving towards X, Y, and Z, but um, it's kind of shifting that thinking. It's all about, we have all these like assumptions and expectations and pressure, all these external influences. And like, I see it. So how do I explain this? So I see this with my kids. This is how I look at it. So I've got 4 children. They're all very different. They've grown up in the same house with the same parents consistently. And there are certain things that my kids do that really, really wind me up and really trigger me. My husband doesn't even notice, it washes right over his head. So for me, because I'm a teacher and I was really disciplined and diligent, anything about homework, education, schooling, it's like, it's all a radar. Like, if I don't see them putting in the effort, I find it so hard to stay calm. And, my husband ended up doing really well, but at school was just a disaster. Everything was the night before, last minute panic. He just thinks the whole school system doesn't set you up for life, and exam grades don't really matter. It's just a tool to get on to the next thing. So anything about that, he doesn't even notice. And it's so important to me. But then there are other things like, for him, for example, like table manners or honesty. Obviously, honesty is important for me as well. But there are certain things that he'll get really upset by, and I don't even notice. And so that shows it's all about you and how you perceive things. It's absolutely nothing to do with what your child is actually doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. So, okay. Like, so for example, my my sons, this is the thing something I've been dealing with recently is that I really want to create an environment of manners and respect. Like, I'm trying that's something that I really want, and it's really, I feel like it's very hard to do when they only live with me half the time, because whatever processes that I put in place can only really be, no matter how much one tries to co-parent, anyone knows it's really actually very, very hard to do to maintain the same standards. Because like you said, in many respects, I'm like your husband in the sense that I don't necessarily passionately care about exam results and things like that, but then I really, really care about other things. And so when they're here, homework is not the biggest priority, as it is when they're with their mother, for example. But I'm trying to instill this sense of sort of respect and politeness, and I find it really, really hard to do. It's almost like, so when they say they're with me for 5 days at a time, it takes about 3 days for things to recalibrate, where they remember that they're at dad's, doing dad's, the way we do things at dad's. It's like, even with their mum, table manners aren't that big a priority at their mum's, but they're a big priority with me. And so
Sounds
it
like a
takes
similar dynamic to my house.
so, but there's this 2 days where they sort of have to recalibrate. I feel guilty about that, right? Like I feel guilty that they're having to sort of live this sort of two parallel dynamics.
Can happen within one household anyway, even if you're both still in the same home. They're doing that all the time in their interactions. Um,
Okay. Well
Both of
then,
you,
well then, okay. Well then, here's the big one, and I almost kind of wanted to avoid this question because it's almost so boring, right? But it's like screens. Okay, so the way that I cope a lot of the time, once I've done the feeding and got to the football matches and done the training and done whatever homework needs to get done, it's like and I need like maybe some time to the boys are fighting or whatever, like being boys, and I'm like, just go to your room and have your screens. And the guilt associated with the state that they come off those screens with, right, is like, but it's like, but it's almost, it's not the only thing that makes them happy. And I know this is a very muddled thought, so bear with me, Rachel, bear with me, listener, right? But it's like, it's like the thing they care about most is screen. All right, this is the thing. Now, whether it's Robux or whatever, or TV, whatever, and no matter what football clubs they're in, and they go and play and they love it and they're with their friends and they're happy, or if I take them on a dog walk in the woods and they're in the woods and they're happy and they're having a good time, the thing that they really want is screens. And on the one hand, and this is something that parents may or may not relate to, I love the peace it gives me,
mm,
right? There is nothing more powerful than go to your room with your screens and I can literally just have complete peace and quiet. And also they like it. But I don't think that there is anything that makes me as profoundly guilty as when they come off the screens, like what I can only describe are crack addicts.
mm, mm,
Like, and I guess my thought that I'm having around screens, and I use a little bit of recovery in this as well. We have a prayer in recovery which goes, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, the wisdom to know the difference. It's like King Canute and the tides, right? Screens are out there, right? Like there is no stopping this now. Like it's happened. And it's, yes, we can keep them off social media for a bit, or we can restrict them having an iPhone till they're a bit older. But this is the world now. It's not,
mm,
it's not like there's no going back unless we all, go and become Amish or something. There's no stopping it.
mm.
And so part of me is like, well, maybe I just need to surrender to the unknown of it all. Maybe I just need to surrender to the fact that I don't know whether this is good or bad, and just do my best. What's the best that I can do? Well, on Friday, I took my teenage daughter and her friends to a gig, and they had this amazing time. My daughter wanted to go. It's an artist she liked. They were like, laughing and excited, and there were tears and emotion, and it was just this beautiful live experience. And I got to be like, well, this is a nice balance, which I suppose will be like the word. How do you balance it? But I just trying to navigate this and think and not knowing quite whether what's right or wrong is unbelievably painful for me
Yeah.
personally.
I think screens and technology are something that parents are really, really grappling with for so many different reasons. For the fact that, like you say, bottom line is sometimes your kids would rather be on a screen than be with their parent or any family members. Um, the fact that it kind of takes them away from doing lots of other things. Like if you say on a Sunday, let's go for a walk, they'll be like, no, I'd rather stay at home, on my bed, on my iPad or whatever it is. And you're like constantly fighting about this thing that is just sucking them in. And there are so many reasons why it's so, some of the best games are designed by neuroscientists so that you literally can't put it down. That's what makes it successful. I don't use it. The only social media I use is LinkedIn. I don't look at it. I literally don't even know how to use other things like Instagram and TikTok. I just sometimes see my kids on them. Um, but it's all designed to just suck you in, brilliantly, all these different features that they have. And so I think my view on screens and the role parents play, and of course, sometimes it's an amazing babysitter. Like if you think going back to, I've never been busier with work than during like lockdown and COVID, and I was giving 7 talks a day on how the hell you're supposed to work full time and homeschool your children and all of that. And people would just stick them in front of screens for hours because you had to get on with working and other things. But I think it's again, going back to like being a bit more consciously aware. So rather than just allowing this to kind of suck our kids in and maybe mean that we don't spend enough time together, is to really think about like what is my approach. Now, some parents, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but they tell me their approach is to like sleep with a router under their pillow and just not let their kids have them at all. And it is part of our world and our life. And there are lots of adults that really struggle with the use of screens as well. So I think our main job is to teach them to use it safely and responsibly. And to do that through communication and connection rather than coercion and control. Because it's like an example is one of my kids, when she was at primary school, her best friend's dad was a dentist. So they were literally never allowed any chocolate or sweets or anything. Now, we've always had like these things available, like a balanced amount of stuff. There was no like, you're never allowed to have that. But my kids are actually they love food. Like when they wake up in the morning, it's all about what we're eating today. And they're healthy eaters, but that kind of stuff was always available. Now, for this child, I remember she used to come to our house and she knew where we kept the chocolate and sweets. And she was like a raving lunatic, like going for that cupboard because they were completely banned from her own home. So I don't necessarily kind of agree with saying like you're absolutely not allowed any of this, but you do need to really think about what are your boundaries. So for example, whether you're talking about a 6-year-old or a 16-year-old, is having some kind of contract that the child's been part of creating together. Like if you want to have the right to do, I don't know what your boys are doing on it, Roblox or whatever, or to, your daughter to have the right to use this phone, this is our agreement together. And these are kind of the guidelines that come with using it. So then it becomes, that's telling us what to do, not this constant like get off your screen and then sometimes ignoring them for 2 hours because it's convenient that they're quiet. And there's this amazing psychiatrist in the States called Dr. Dan Siegel. He's written loads of books on parenting, and he uses his knowledge of neuroscience to impact how we parent. And one of the things I remember in his book on teenagers is he talks about a healthy mind platter. So, we're all very familiar with the idea of a healthy diet. So you've got, your vitamins and protein and this and that. But a healthy mind is like really talking to your kids and modeling to them all the different elements that they need to kind of look after their mental and physical well-being. So, parts of your day, it could be real life relationships and interaction. Parts of your day are like focus time. Parts of it are maybe, involving a screen. Part of it might be just to like offload, and it could be meditation or mindfulness or some kind of unstructured time as well. Because the other thing I find with kids, and this is where screens are adding another layer of difficulty. One of the things I think is amazing when we live, well, there's many things that are amazing when we lived without screens, but we learn how to kind of cope with being bored. I sometimes sit on the tube. I did this the other day. I was going on the tube for work, and I was just sitting on my phone like this, like everyone does. I think I was reading the newspaper and whatever. And then I was like, oh, this is giving me a headache. Like, I just want to put this thing down. And I looked around me and there wasn't a single person that wasn't sitting like that. And I'm like, if, 30, we'd be like, what the hell is everyone doing? You're never just there just to kind of be and sit and have unstructured time. And even if you're standing at a red light or you're waiting for your coffee to come in Starbucks or whatever, we're all just immediately doing that. So we don't ever really get comfortable with our own thoughts and with ourselves. It's just there's always entertainment or something going on. And it means that our kids are not very proficient in just keeping themselves entertained and, making up stupid games and stuff that we used to do when we were kids. And they're expecting either a screen or that you've arranged some activity, or they've got a friend round, or they want your attention, and they've literally got no clue what to do when they're bored. And that's another guilt thing. Oh my gosh, my child's bored at the weekend. Well, so what? Like, it's good. It's good to be bored and to kind of
Yeah.
have some creativity and come up with ideas of what to do.
And this is such a big one. There's a few things I just want to pick up on. My, my my son, my 11-year-old, will sort of weaponize his boredom. I mean, he's autistic, although I'm not entirely, sold on that. But he'll go, Dad, you don't want me bored. You don't want me bored in the house. It's almost like I'll make it really difficult, if I'm bored. And the truth is that, him and his brother bored, is probably like two Tasmanian devils, literally
Yeah, they'll start
beating
fighting
the
for each
crap out
other.
of each other throughout the entire house. And then what will happen, that I'm sort of okay with that. It's that then the youngest one probably is going to get really hurt. He is then going to take it 3 or 4 levels up. And now we're getting into very dangerous territory as to the repercussions on each other of their fighting. And ultimately, the only way I'm going to be able to stop it and bring some harmony and equilibrium back into the house is probably by giving them the screens back, right? And it's because what you're saying is so true, and it's so rational. I think the real powerlessness, I think, as a parent, is that I feel is that it's what they want more than anything, right?
Mm.
It's
But
like
I
I said, like,
It seems like it is, but it probably isn't. I don't know. I
well,
mean,
what do
do
you
an
think it?
experiment. Take it away for a day and see. But I think, like, we've had times when so for example, if we ever do like a family holiday abroad, I can't do this now because my kids are adults and they have their own money, that they've got jobs and whatever. But I would never like get them data or something abroad. So or like none of us would take a phone if we're doing some hike somewhere. And so they have to like engage in and interact with each other. The other thing that I hear a lot from kids, so have you ever done this thing? I mean, yours are younger. Do they have their own phones, the boys, or no, they don't?
Oh no, my daughter has an iPhone. The 11-year-old has like a Nokia.
But when you look at like your screen time, what kids always say to me is this is the biggest argument they have with their parents. But they say, "I think my parents use it way more than I do." And parents will say, "Well, that's because it's adult, it's important work. I'm answering emails or whatever." But if you think about it from a child's perspective, most of the time they interact, I'm not saying you, but on the whole, with their parents, they're just, you know, even babies, like none of that eye contact. I've seen buggies with a thing, a stand that you can slot a device in that they can. So it's like from the kids' perspective as well. Like my children have quite honestly said, especially my son, I've got a boy and 3 girls. He's like, "You're so lucky that you grew up without screens." Like they feel like it's just following them everywhere. I mean, he's been very, very um like intentional about his use of them. So it's actually quite amazing. But I wanted to show my husband wanted to show him something the other night on Instagram, and he's like, "No, it's like an hour before I'm planning to go to bed, so I'm not." gonna allow that light to impact my sleep. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, he says to his friends, if it's my birthday, don't send me a WhatsApp message. If you actually mean that you want to wish me happy birthday, pick up the phone and speak to me.
And do you know
But
what? This could be one of these beautiful pendulum swings. And the byproduct of going really extreme with screens is that actually there then becomes a really, really healthy pushback,
I think
that
that is a
actually,
thing that I've been reading about that is going on right now.
but like Gen Alpha, like that age group who, will at some point just leap back from it. And I guess, you know what you're uncovering for me a little bit, and this is not wanting to beat myself up anymore, but yes, would my children like me to sort of arrange fun for them? Like, do they, what would, because I said, it's the thing they want the most. Well, what do they really want the most? Would it be to be like connection with their father? Well, yes, and they do get connection with their father. But, I suppose if I said, guys, do you want to play Roblox, whatever it's called, or let's play a board game together, or let's go and, I don't know, play football somewhere together. I still think it's a toss up for them whether they'll want to. Now, if I go, right, no, let's go and play football, they might kick and scream a little bit and then we'll have a good time. But the
Mm,
thing is that the effort that I find it is to get them to that point where they're eventually sort of having a good time is just so much, right? And again, it's not that I then don't do it. It's that I sort of feel that guilt a little bit again of have I not instilled in them this fun collaborative time properly, where the instinct to go and play football together is a thing? Um, and yes, does that make sense?
yeah. I think you're making me think about another pressure that parents put on themselves, which is especially because a lot of the people I work with are working full time in very, very intense, demanding jobs. Um, And it's this pressure to kind of create this amazing family time. So if you've got this time at the weekend, you've got to be doing some incredible activity. And I remember when my kids were young, I don't know, we'd say, right, on Sunday we're going to the Tower of London, and just the journey to get there and the bickering that was going on
Yeah.
you're like, what the hell? I'm exhausted and we haven't even started. And then can I have an ice cream? Can I have this and can I have that? And I think we have to just pale it back a bit and keep things simpler. And all they really want is our attention and our presence. Like I remember a few months ago, I said to my kids, like, what is one of your favorite memories from childhood? And they've done we've done over the years some really cool stuff and visited some amazing places, even abroad. And and one of them said, they said, you know what one of my favorite memories is when we had that salad making competition. And I was like, "What?" And I was trying to remember, and there's basically one Saturday, I've always been, like, trying to get lots of kids to come round to us because it's just a really good way to, like, see the dynamic and get to know their friends, and I always wanted to have that house where children wanna come to us. So we've got that, I've it's we can have 11 kids running around, and that was the way. And so one Saturday it was like pouring with rain and I was like pulling my hair out because you have lots of different ages. And I used to find a lot more arguing going on with siblings when one had a friend round and the other one didn't, which changes the whole dynamic. So I was quite desperate and I was like, right, there were quite a lot of kids there. We're going to have a salad making competition. So go into pairs and you can use any ingredients you want. And then we're kind of going to judge them together in terms of how it looks and creativity and how it tastes. And it was just some stupid idea, but they loved it so much. We also only ever did it once, but it's sometimes really simple things that you can do. I think we over complicate because our lives have become so, what's the word? Just so, I don't know, not slick, but everything has to be like so special and amazing. And like maybe that's also part of this, like what we're showing to everyone else. What did you do at the weekend? Well, actually, we just stayed at home and had family time. Well, that's not very interesting. You feel like a pressure to do all this stuff. But actually, and especially if, you're not with your kids all the time. And very often they do resist, like, oh, no, I don't want to do that. What an awful idea. But also asking them what ideas they have about, what can we do together?
Yeah, it's lovely, and I think, I do think, with my sons, if we did a salad making competition, it's the competition that would end up backfiring on me. It's like, well, who wins? And then it's like someone's going to be throwing someone's salad at a wall. Uh,
Yeah.
but no,
Which
but
is
but
an example of something that had stuck in their head as a really enjoyable afternoon that I wouldn't have.
I'm totally with you, and it's like, the thing around, you said connection and presence, or time and presence. And it's a running theme for me to learn how to be present in all aspects of my life, whether it's with my romantic partner, my fiance, or whether it's with, work or the children. The reason why presence, I think people struggle with presence, is because ultimately it requires sitting with oneself. All right.
Mm,
And until one is able to comfortably sit with oneself, being present can actually be an uncomfortable place for people to be. This is just listening to you, it helped me sort of reflect on this, because, I like to try and distract myself, I guess, sometimes. If I'm overwhelmed with the children, then maybe I want screen time. It's like maybe I need time to just, do some stuff, or maybe it's because I need to do some work or something. But it's like, but this concept of presence, and I just wonder how people, feel about it. Presence, when I work with clients in my world, having them start to meditate can actually be, although incredibly simple, an incredibly challenging thing. Because what I'm
mm,
actually asking them to do is to sit with themselves
mm,
quietly, even just for 10 minutes. It's not hard, but it can be painful.
mm.
And I was just thinking about how the obstacle to giving my children real presence is sometimes not so much about not wanting to, or it even being an obstacle. It's actually me having to be present with myself.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, no, no, it does. It makes a lot of sense. Um, when when we become parents, we're almost like, I read this idea that you're like reparenting yourself. You've got to sort so much out with yourself first before you can to understand your own emotions and your own triggers. And there's even things like you were talking before about the importance of instilling like respect in your kids. And where does that maybe it comes from, that's what your parents expected from you. And then you get this trigger, like your child speaks to you in like quite a disrespectful, dismissive way. And without you even realizing it, what's probably happening is you're going back to like thinking, oh my God, if I spoke to my parents like that when I was a child, X, Y, and Z would have happened. And how have I got to this state where it's okay for you to do that? Just so much stuff comes rushing in that you don't even, it's like about pausing in between like what they're doing, the stimulus, and how you're gonna respond to it.
It's funny because for me, what you just said, it's almost the reverse. It's that I didn't have respect
Yes.
instilled into me by my parents, and so actually, the way that I have spoken to my father in the past is not respectful at all. And I think when my children are disrespectful to me, what it does is it triggers in me
How you were
not
with.
wanting to create the dynamic. Me and my dad are good now, but it was not particularly healthy. It was a lot of codependency, and I'm terrified that they're holding a mirror up to my dynamic with my father, and that somehow I'm now recreating that with
Yeah.
them. But it's sort of the same, I guess.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
what it triggers.
Well, something that I believe, which isn't very popular with kind of older, more traditional people that love this kind of authoritarian style of parenting, is I kind of say you're expecting respect. I'm not saying this for you at all, because I'm sure it's not the case, but you're expecting your kids to respect you. But how are you modeling, that you respect them? It's this just
or
you.
even
Older
myself.
people think you must respect me because I'm the adult and I'm the parent and I'm in charge. But what have you done to kind of really earn that respect and trust? And that also comes, I'm very into the idea of intrinsic rather than extrinsic motivation. So, a popular thing with parents is bribery, or if you do this, then you can get that. And you're just creating this, or like, make your bed and I'm going to give you pocket money. And like, ultimately, you want your kids to do the right thing, to treat people well, to work hard at school, whatever it is that you think they should do for them, not to make anyone else happy, but for them. And that's back to like what we're saying about making yourself happy, but understanding what your goals and values are. So like another activity that I do with parents. So for many, many years I ran like this 10-week parenting course, and I would have parents who've heard about me from all sorts of walks of life, and I would run this 10-week course. It was over 10 weeks. I teach them a strategy and then they try it out and talk it through. Now I've got like an online version of that. But one of the things that I always um, get families to do, and you can do this just with a partner before you've even had kids, is like almost create like a family mission statement. So to talk to your kids about, what are our really important values as a family? What really drives us? Because whether you had a school or an organization or a charity or whatever, they always have like an ethos, a mission, a something that you're driving towards. And you never ever think to do that within your own family unit. And so it gives you like a compass and a destination. It doesn't mean every single day but when you're making difficult decisions, or when you're thinking about how you spend your time, how does this align with our values and what we think is really important to us? And those values can evolve over time, but especially for kids your age, it's an amazing like exercise to do with them. Like, when you're in this home, what are we all about? And is it respect for each other? Is it I don't know, healthy lifestyle? Is it volunteering? I don't know what it is. It can be anything for any individual family, but really being very, really articulating what is actually important and what to prioritize.
Yeah, that's some next level stuff. I love it. It's something I use in business all of the time. And I hadn't thought to do it, but I love the idea. I'm even thinking about we could build a family crest, and maybe I'll get some signet rings made at some point, and they can, you know,
See like posters, or stick it all on a bag, or like I've seen, families. It doesn't have to be a public thing, but
yeah,
you can just like, this is kind of our family guide that we're
I
working
like
to.
it a lot. One of the things that that, again, you brought up for me just now and talking even before the values element was so much of, I think it was, there's this guy called Rabbi Shais Taub who I follow, who he talks a lot about 12-step recovery, he talks a lot about parenting. He's a very wise man. And something he was talking about parenting, and he said, why is it that, that when our kids like hurt us or hurt our feelings, it really hurts. And I think this is a big thing for me from listening to you. It's like, and I think what he goes on to sort of start to talk about is, because it's such a reflection for us. It's such a mirror. It's like you said earlier about, seeing ourselves, having to then parent ourselves so we can parent others. Like, it's an unbelievably rich source of development, parenting. And, so when my daughter for a while would sort of very, could weaponize if she
You
really
love that.
wanted to hurt.
You really like that word weaponize.
Maybe I should use it less, but the way it's just how I see it. But she'd be very good at, like, she knows how to hurt my feelings. If she wants to really, if she wanted to, she could, she knows to go down a road of, I'm a bad father, perhaps, right? Or maybe something her mother used to say, right? It's like she knows how to really, really hurt. And but then I had this really massive breakthrough a little while ago where I realized that I don't need her to behave in a certain way for me to feel worthy
Yeah,
and loved. I
yeah,
had for a very long time been putting a lot of my worth into how they treat me. The breakthrough happened though because I I just said to her one day, she was really angry with me about some stuff from the past, and she was, really, she was just really angry. And I just said to her, darling, I love you. I'm here for you. It's not okay to talk to me like that. Right? It's just not, that's not something I'm going to tolerate. I love you. I'm here for you. I'll always love you. It's the end of that conversation. And I just left it, and I left it for a few days, and eventually she came back. And but what I realized I had done, and it was this almost like an anxious attachment that I'd had, that I constantly needed her to be happy and to be kind and to be loving. Otherwise, I felt like I was failing on some catastrophic level. But actually, when I let go of that need
yeah, yeah.
and allowed for her to come and us to have this, now we go, it's really beautiful relationship.
I think like one of my favorite topics that I speak about is all about, emotions and helping children learn how to manage and articulate emotions. Because I think that is the most important life skill and is like the key to unlock everything in any relationship that they have. But what makes parenting so difficult is, so basically what you're describing, in our brains we actually have mirror neurons, which means you really do mirror the emotions of those closest to you. So, there's this expression, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. But when your child is struggling in some way, when they're behaving in a way that you don't like, you take it really personally. And then you mirror their emotions. So I'll give you an example. You've got a toddler at a petrol station, and you know how they have the chocolates and the sweets where you go to pay. And I've seen so many young kids having these huge meltdowns because their parent is saying, no, we're not buying that now. And you're also adding in the dynamic of parenting with an audience because there are other people watching. But you almost see the parent have their own mini toddler meltdown in response to their child. And it's to keep having this like narrative in your head, like, I'm, I'm the grown up. I'm not going to take this personally. My child is having a problem, not being a problem. And I need to, it's so hard to do, but I'm going to be that calm sounding board. There is another like parenting person or author that talks about parenting is like being the captain of a ship. So if you're on a huge ship and the ship is sinking, you don't see the captain like flapping and going mad and screaming their heads off, but they're modeling being calm, and you look to them to kind of set the tone. Um, and kids of all ages go through all different periods of meltdowns and tantrums and all the rest of it, and we're basically pouring petrol on the fire because we're then, taking it personally. This shows that you don't respect me. This shows that I have no control. This shows X, Y, and Z about you. And you've just got to let go of all of that. I don't know if you've come across the term like emotion coaching, but it's coined by, have you ever come across Professor John Gottman or the Gottman Institute?
But yeah,
Absolutely amazing expo in relationships and stuff. But he's also written a book on raising an emotionally intelligent child. And in that moment of like when your child is experiencing a difficult emotion, first of all, we always get drawn into the behavior. So we just try and stop, like, don't speak to me in that tone, or don't ignore me, or whatever it is, or stop whacking your brother. Um, and we focus and we respond to the behavior, which is like, that analogy of the iceberg. That is just the behavior is just the tip. What's going on underneath is the emotions and the feelings that are driving it. And so the only helpful thing to do in that moment is just to kind of um, just to try and get your child back to being calm. There's no point trying to reason or say, why did you do that? Or punish or whatever in the moment. And it's really just about trying to, you said this before with your son when maybe at bedtime you say that I get that you're really angry or you're really frustrated, but just to try and put into words what you think maybe they're feeling, even if it's not right, and to get them back to like their thinking brain being online. But we kind of just make some of these situations, especially with our own kids, a million times worse by being drawn in. And you're separating yourself from, your child. This is your child's problem. It's not anything that you've done wrong. And you're just trying to kind of coach them through letting, getting out of that
It's
frustration or anger or anxiety or whatever it is.
it's so true. This is the big thing for me from this conversation is how much of the drama is aligned to the self-reflection, right? And, even listening to you then, I'm like, yeah, no, but I'm really self-aware and I'm really emotionally aware and I'm really, really good for like at being able to sit down and go, let's discuss how you're feeling and where this has come from and let me play it back to you and da da da. And I'm really good at that for the first hour. And then I have a breaking point. But it's like, but the breaking point is that I haven't been able, quite frankly, and I'm not criticizing myself, I deserve a medal for sustaining the hour, but to sustain the non attachment to the personal narrative that this is a reflection of me,
Yeah. It's
and
exhausting. It's so hard.
And
So
and
hard.
I and we don't need an answer to it. Just I just think the acknowledgement of that of the pain really comes from the reflection, and whether one's conscious or unconscious to it. You think about a child throwing a tantrum in public and how that makes one feel. It's like even on an unconscious level, it's sort of just embarrassment, perhaps, but even on a conscious
Yeah.
level.
I never get, why do we care more about what a complete stranger thinks than like having the confidence to in that moment do the right thing for your child?
Well, I actually
We
know the
yeah.
answer to this one. I actually know the answer to this one, and it's aligned to pride, and it's aligned and pride as a defect of character as opposed to a positive thing is that we worry about what other people think, and we worry about what other people think because there is occasionally a core belief around self-centered fear that, and that core belief might is not going to necessarily be positive. Now, it's irrational, the core belief. The core belief, let's say that I am not enough, right? Now, irrational, but something I carry with me maybe from childhood. Now, my child screaming the house down and people I don't even know looking at me is triggering the sense of pride that this is somehow some case evidence as to how I am now, in fact, unworthy, because what everyone is now seeing is that I am not a good parent, right? And so what it's triggering is that core belief from when I was 4 versus actually any rational.
Mm. And you're making me think, I read something really fascinating today in a LinkedIn post, which said something about emotion. So in that moment with the audience, you feel maybe strong embarrassment, like that sense of embarrassment. You feel like tension, your face gets a bit hot, whatever it is. So it was saying that the actual emotion only lasts about 90 seconds. So you have some physiological response, like stuff is going on in your neural pathways that literally lasts 90 seconds, the emotion. What makes it carry on is the story that you then create and the narrative, and then like going over it and like whatever, making it all extra complicated. And you know what's happening in your body versus what is actually happening with your thoughts, and continuing it and coming back to it and fast forwarding into the future and all this stuff that we do. And that's, back to what we've been saying all along, like from the beginning, that everything begins with you. And that's why with all this stuff that I do with parents, and around raising children, and what I was trying to do back in the day when I was teaching hundreds of other people's kids, is really helping children to build that really authentic sense of self-esteem, not being like cocky and arrogant and overconfident, but
Mm.
just feeling comfortable within themselves, like they're good enough and comfortable in their own skin.
Well, that's all I'm now ever trying to do really with my children. But I want to table something else with you, just as just while I've still got you, is it, and because it feeds into this. So, like I say, my 11-year-old son is, he does err on the side of difficult sometimes. He's also beautifully empathetic, and he's like so sweet, and he's so creative, and he's wonderful, but he has like a temper and a sense of injustice that is hypersensitive, and so
Mm.
he will throw tantrums sometimes. And when him and his brother are fighting, and this sort of comes to this comes to a little bit of, I guess, and this is my subjective opinion, but it's kind of around gender role. It's like, as a father, because sometimes when I see them fighting, and I feel like I just need to let them fight, right? I need to let them, well, as long as it doesn't become, life threatening or anything, that I just need to let them reach a conclusion, that at some point they need to understand where the end point is. They're not listening to someone telling them to stop. It doesn't seem to be resolving anything when a parent steps in. And it's almost like, well, as their father, there is a part of me, and I might be completely wrong about this, right? But I'll be vulnerable enough to table it, that feels like I need to let them sort of be boys and fight. And, when they're done, they're done. And the thing is that I don't know what the answer is to this. But what I guess I feel deep down, and I've noticed this since being a single parent for 5 years, where I have been, mum and dad in my household. And then since, getting engaged and there being a maternal figure in the home, and how that has positively impacted the dynamic of the household. It's just got me thinking more and more about the role of the father, the role of the mother, and I'm not getting into sort of gender politics with it. It could be two men, two women, as far as I'm concerned. There's male and female energy, but there is this deeply genetic need to roles of the father and the mother, regardless of sex. I'm not getting into that, right? It's like, and I just, I don't know. It's like, for me, when I'm just sort of going, okay, I'm not going to make this tantrum, this argument that you two are having or whatever about me, and I'm going to step back. At what point do I step in? And like it's really, it's an unknown, and I'm not saying you have the answer to this. It's just something
Mm.
I'm feeling that, again, as a species, we have lost a lot of our way on, perhaps.
So one of the things with siblings, first thing to say is that I literally used to really seriously hate my brother, who was 20 months younger than me. He was so horrid. And we are so incredibly close now. And I see that with just my older two, who are also 20 months apart. The others really, on the whole, get on really well. So it also doesn't mean, I think, again, it's a bit of that feeling like I failed as a parent if my own kids can't even get along, and like, what's going on here? Why don't we have this loving, amazing family where everyone's really close. So again, it's like that kind of guilt or sense of failing. But the other thing with siblings, so my kids laugh at me, but they know from quite a young age that I'm all about this idea of conflict resolution. I'm not talking about necessarily the United Nations, but very often what happens is you've got this triangle. So you've got the two kids and then you've got the parent. And the parent, and I learned this from when I was a teacher and I was trying to solve like arguments that were going on in the playground at break time. And I could spend the whole of the next lesson just trying to sort out who started what. And you can actually never get to the bottom of it. But as an adult, there is this tendency to think my job is to come in as judge and jury and almost like the rescuer to solve everything. And one of them has got to be the aggressor, and one of them has got to be the victim. But if you think about that triangle of victim, aggressor, and rescuer, you don't really want either of your kids to be one of those things. And also, you're not actually teaching them the skills to sort out conflict themselves. So one thing you could do is like, and obviously with boys, play fighting. I mean, they say roughhousing is an amazing thing for dads or anyone to do with their kids as well, just to get rid of a lot of energy. And it can be back to just being bored and it's just something fun to do. But not in the moment, but they're old enough to kind of talk about next time you're in that real fighting mode. How would you like me to help you? Like, do you think it helps if I intervene, or should I just leave you to it? Obviously, there are times if they're really one's gonna end up being properly physically hurt, that you just might need to kind of separate them and put them in different rooms. But also, if it's something that's happening all the time, what I used to do if there was a particular situation is sit the kids down once they're calm and just like rehash what was going on and give them that space. And you don't spend more than a minute on the problem. So I've noticed, when you're bored or you've got nothing to do, you end up getting very physical or whatever it is, however you want to frame it. But then giving each of them an opportunity to express how they feel about it, but asking them to come up with the solution. So like, what should we do next time it's getting really physical and violent? Or what should we do? So it's, they're the ones doing the problem solving, and it's not you coming in to, or feeling like it's your responsibility to sort it out. Because actually, conflict between siblings is the first way that you learn to deal with, other relationships. So not taking yourself too seriously, dealing with teasing or aggression or whatever. And that's why it's really hard for only children to kind of sometimes manage those relationships in the playground or whatever, because they haven't been able to test it on their siblings. And a sibling, also the other thing that frustrates parents is why their kids are so annoying and challenging with them, but they go to someone else's house or even to a grandparent. Oh, your child is so charming and wonderful. They cleared the whole table, and I've never had a child sleep over and make their bed when they leave. And you're like, fucker, you've never actually ever done that in our house. And it's because it's actually a really good sign. Like, why do they have a meltdown after a day at school, but they've kept it together? And the teacher's like, oh, your child is so lovely and helpful and polite. It's because they feel so safe with you. That's the way it should be, because they can like allow their true selves to just come out, and it's exhausting for them to keep it together all day. So I don't know what I'm saying, but it's just a whole lot.
No. That's right. I know what you're saying is profound, and I laugh a little bit because I some of this I do apply, and if I was to ask in the moment, my 9-year-old what he would like me to do, he'd be like, put his brother up for adoption. I think is his general response to that. But okay, cool. Well, so look, there's a last question I want to sort of ask around the concept of learning how to parent. And I think in 2025, we are humble enough generally about asking for help. And it's like, okay, so how, you know, if anyone's going into parenting or is a parent, and it's 2025, and we're like, well, okay, what do we, what should we be learning? What should we be learning, and how should we be learning it? And obviously it's incredibly broad, but maybe just in the theme of what we've been talking about, what would you say to that?
I think one of the really important things, and back to like focusing on what's right for you and your family, is like I said, establishing your priorities and your values, which is a very personal thing, but also having a really honest conversation with yourself and then possibly with your partner, or if you're a single parent, whoever's caring for your child with you, and asking yourself, what does being a good enough parent really look like? Like, what are the absolute priorities? Back to what I was saying about what are the core qualities and skills that my child needs to succeed in life? And how am I going to ensure that I really focus on that stuff that's really important, and maybe not worry so much about, other things that are taking up our time? And being really, really crystal clear and consciously aware of that. And so, just some examples for me personally are things like what I was saying about emotional intelligence, so that my kids really deeply know how to like articulate, understand, and manage their emotions, and offer empathy and understanding to others. Things like um really nurturing creativity. I'm not like a creative person in a physical sense, but all my kids are very artistic and quite musical, which comes from my husband. And having that like problem solving approach and giving them the skills to work things out for themselves. So it's very much like with parenting, it's very much more of a coach, like you do coaching, more of this coaching style rather than military commander. So allowing them to develop in their way and find solutions for themselves, even if they make mistakes. Also, like attitude towards mistakes is really, really important, and how you model that and how open you are about when you've messed up yourself. So those are the kinds of, the relationships, the enjoying the experience of learning. Like I'm really struggle with, my business is called Educating Matters because I care about education, but I'm finding it more and more difficult, and seeing three of my kids become adults and go through further education is like such a big chunk of our child's life is taken up at school. And I just think I've got one now doing GCSEs is just torture. Like the whole school curriculum and what they're doing. Listen, I'm going off on a tangent, but what they're actually spending their time doing at school is not really giving them the skills that they need in life, and especially with advances in technology and AI and all the rest of it. So I think it's having that confidence to think, I know what's right for our circumstances, our family. I've got this definition of what it means to be a good enough parent, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and not worry about, societal expectations or assumptions, or the community that I'm living in, or what the other parents that I know are doing with my kid, my kids' peers, but just to have that confidence and intention to think you're doing the right thing for your family.
I would love to know more about the education stuff, or what you think it's falling short on. I mean, for me, it's all emotional awareness. We don't necessarily need to go into it now, but I think you've what the epiphany that I've had on this conversation, and it's for me, it's it's might just be my own selfish subjective benefit, but it's really really blown the doors off of something that I was coming to be really aware of, that when I'm feeling pain around parenting, that it really is an opportunity of growth for me. If I'm feeling pain, and I'm thinking that I'm not enough, that I've failed, that I've, that something that you know, that something the children are doing, it does it's almost like they don't it doesn't it shouldn't have that much power, right? If I'm feeling viscerally painful about something, chances are it's something to do with a narrative about myself. It's actually not about them.
Mm,
And it's an opportunity for me to take some time and actually reflect on that and reflect on why have I been so triggered by this tantrum in the petrol station? Why, is that moment of disrespect so profoundly hurtful for me? And yes, it may well be unacceptable. Yes, there may well be ways and means to discuss it, but I don't need to feel the pain around it that I do, that leads to guilt and perhaps anger, and sometimes maybe my own tantrums, and so it's been really, really powerful in anchoring that, so for that alone, I'm very grateful, Rachel. Anything else?
just, could talk all day for weeks on this topic. But I think one thing that's really important to say is don't have this impression that everyone else has like, got it all sorted. I always try to say to my kids, you can literally never know what is going on in anyone else's home, and trying to create that space even amongst your friends. And I try and do this in the work that I do in companies of just creating that space. Like I come in and I give tools and strategies and I talk about topics, whether it's screens or emotions or motivation or choosing a school or whatever. But part of it is creating that space for people to really feel comfortable openly talking about their challenges. I've met CEOs that can not command respect, but they have that respect from hundreds of employees. And then they'll tell me how much they're struggling at home. They've got all these amazing leadership skills. Their kids don't care who they are and what credentials they have. And that's why also parenting is such an incredible leveler. It doesn't matter what your socio-economic background is, your culture or this or that. Like it's everyone at every level is having similar kind, not exactly, but thoughts, challenges, questioning, feeling guilt, like you haven't got it all right. And God, if only people really knew what was going on. And I think we've got to provide that space for other parents that we know to kind of start those conversations and create that space to like say it's okay. Like we haven't got it sorted and there's no perfect parent out there.
Is it ever too late?
No, I've already answered that, I hope.
You
Definitely,
did.
definitely not. Definitely not. It's never too late.
You did, but I think it's a powerful thing to emphasize at the end is that it's not, it's never too late. But look, Rachel, thank you so much. And we could talk for hours about this. And maybe we'll do another one day. But I will put all of the details for you and Educating Matters and everything else. It will be in the threads, so that people can find you and follow you. You have proven yourself to me once again to be the wise sage when it comes to these things, and you can tell me that you're not, but you are. And it was just beautiful, and I'm really, really very grateful. And so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. There you go. Thanks for listening to Learning How to Live. If this sparked something for you, share it, subscribe, and remember, you don't have to escape your life. You can build one worth staying for.